Welcome to another episode of the Pro Trade Craft Career Toolbox, the podcast where we dive deep into the trends, skills, and opportunities shaping the construction and remodeling industries. I am your host, Don Fernando. Today, we are thrilled to have Sheri Koones with us, an acclaimed author whose latest book sheds light on the burgeoning world of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. In her groundbreaking new book, ADUs, The Perfect Housing Solution, Sheri explores the architectural and design aspects of ADUs and delves into their potential to revolutionize the housing market. As more homeowners look for flexible and creative living solutions, the ADU movement presents a golden opportunity for remodeling contractors. Today, we'll discuss how this trend could be the stepping stone for new contractors aiming to expand into full home building. Sheri, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Fernando. Happy to be here.
I received my hard copy of your beautiful book just yesterday, and it's really gorgeous. It's so nicely done. I'm really impressed. I hope that a lot of people will get it because it's kind of a coffee table book. It's just something that you could really, it's just a pleasure to look at.
Thank you.
Well, not everybody's into the jargon of the new emerging world of housing like ADUs. So could you start by giving us kind of an overview of what ADUs are and why they've become such a hot topic in today's housing market?
Sure. So a lot of people don't, as you said, they don't know what ADUs are. And when I was writing this book, I would tell friends, I'm writing about ADUs. And they say, what is that? And they said, oh, that's accessory dwelling units. And they said, they never heard of it. And then when they hear about it, everybody wants one. So before I say anything else, I just want to distinguish between tiny homes and ADUs because everybody confuses those and they say, oh, you're talking about tiny homes. Tiny homes, as you know, Fernando, are mobile. They're not code compliant, and generally they are not attached to the grid. They have water tanks and so forth. ADUs, even though they're small and sometimes they're what you might consider tiny, they are code compliant and they have kitchen and they have a sleeping area. So they are really a full area for somebody to live in. And
it's a small house.
It's a small house. As a matter of fact, I have a house in one of my recent books that was like 350 square feet. It was in Vermont. It was one of the professors there. And he just didn't want to have a lot of stuff. So he said, I just want a small house. So people say, oh, that's a tiny house. It is not a tiny house. It's just a very small house. ADUs are erupting as a very important aspect of residential housing because there's a shortage of housing and there's a shortage of affordable housing and even middle range housing. A lot of young people are graduating from college with massive school loans. And whereas years ago, kids got out of college and a year or two later, they got married, bought a house. Today, they can't afford that. And they certainly can't afford it in the neighborhoods that they're growing up in. And another big population that's very interested in ADUs are seniors. A lot of seniors years ago would move into senior facilities. But people now that are 65, 75, and even 80, they're still very vital. They're much younger than our parents were. And they want to live in the community. They want to be close to their kids. ADUs are a wonderful opportunity for them to remain in the neighborhood where they have lived, maybe living on the property where their primary house was and letting their children live in the main house. It's an opportunity for older people to have a caretaker who's not under their feet and live in the ADU. So there's a whole population that need these housing.
Explain a little bit about how the ADU works in relationship to some older folks moving into a small unit on their property and allowing their family to live in the original house, in the main house. So explain how the ADU relates to the house. In other words, when you were talking about opportunities for people who can't afford a home, blah, 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 they don't go out and buy an ADU, right? They rent one or live in one. So how is it, explain the ADU relative to real estate in terms of where it goes, how it is.
Okay, sure. So ADUs can go in several different locations. Some people will put them over the garage.
Mhm.
That location is there already and it's not being utilized. And even people that don't have a backyard, they can put it over the garage. Some people are attaching the ADU to their house to get additional space, but have some privacy. Some people are putting them in the garage, in the basements. I haven't actually seen any of those, but I know that they can exist. And then other people are just putting them on the property apart from the house. But they're a great solution for a variety of different things. One is people are putting them on so that their adult children have a place to live. Some people are putting them on, they're building ADUs for their elderly parents. Some people are building ADUs as a way of an investment so that they're renting them out either long-term or short-term. Some people don't have enough space and they've made a decision. I have several of those in the book where they made a decision not to knock down their house, but they need space. So they're putting in an ADU. One of the ADUs, which is so charming in this book, was built on a laneway house. So laneways were actually the predecessor to ADUs. In Canada, a lot of people are building them because there's such a shortage, particularly in Vancouver. So in Vancouver in particular, and also in Toronto, they have something called laneways. So the main street has a narrow street parallel to the primary street, and people have garages there. And so the garages don't face the main street. And so
So like
people,
alleys,
so people are,
alleys, or mews, as they
right.
are called in London. Okay.
And so some people are replacing those garages and putting an ADU. And this
Okay.
one family, there's a builder in Denver who's wonderful. He just had a baby and his house was too small and his in-laws would come and spend time and it was very tight to have them staying in his house. So over his garage, he put an ADU that's 250 or 300. It is the most beautiful structure. He just put lots of windows and skylights and he has everything in there. And so it's an opportunity to have guests and not have people underfoot. Also, people, they're building it perhaps for their kids. And then when their kids have kids and they need more space, they're swapping locations and the parents will move into the ADU.
So the ADU is additional, which reminds me of additions. So that it can be an addition or it can be a separate building, right? So the key is the D and the U, dwelling unit. And by dwelling, it means it has a kitchen and a bathroom, basically.
Right. It has a separate entrance, so people have privacy. And one of the other big, I think, future things that's going to happen is multi-generational housing. A lot of people today, there's a growing senior population and they want to live with their kids. And as I said, they don't want to live in a senior facility. So two of the houses in my book were built actually as multi-generational. There's one in Avon, Connecticut that was built by just a terrific architect. And they designed a house that has a porch in between the house and the ADU, and the parents live in the ADU and they can meet whenever they want, and the grandparents can spend time with the kids and they can help with babysitting, and adult children can help if the parents need additional help. So this is I think a very growing trend. There's another one that I have that's absolutely beautiful in DC. So as the population of seniors becomes larger, this is again a growing concept.
And a lot cheaper than putting grandma into a nursing home, or assisted living. Those are very expensive living options. Now, from a contractor's point of view, from a contractor's perspective, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that come with constructing ADUs compared to just traditional remodeling?
You have to get approvals, as you do with anything. And in some towns, they have different restrictions. So it can be challenging. And people complain about that. It takes time to get approvals and so forth. But one of the interesting things that would be great for contractors that want to help somebody build a house is there are certain municipalities that have pre-approved plans that were actually, I want to say, donated by the architects. They've already gone through the approval process and the coding. And so the contractor can go and get some of those plans and offer them to the homeowner, and they don't have to go through a lot of the processes. There are some towns around the country that are offering incentives to building an ADU on the property, so that if they will rent them to at market value or below, and there's money to build these, or as I said, or discounts on taxes and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities today. This is when I started writing about ADUs about 10 years ago, I would find one here, one there, and there were laneways. But today I'm finding them all over the country. So there's lots of opportunities, and it's growing, and people are meeting with, I think that contractors should be proactive in meeting with town officials to make sure that they're approving ADUs and that they're making it viable for the homeowner. Sometimes they put such big restrictions on ADUs that it's difficult for contractors to build, like parking space. Also, in many towns, I would say most of them, the homeowner has to live in either the ADU or the primary home. But I have a house in the book in Georgia, in Atlanta. You're allowed to rent out both places. And so I have a woman who was investing in building houses, and she's renting them. And she discovered that she could put ADUs on that property, and she could double some of her income.
Here where I am in Houston, you can do that. I think you can put up to 6 on a single property.
God.
So you can, and you can rent them all out. Now, I remember what we used to call carriage houses, which was the premium place that you could find as a college student. There's a car, because you have privacy. It's not an apartment building. It's a little place. I owned a tiny house that I rented. I really bought a lot that had a little cottage on it. And this little cottage used to be a train worker's house. And I was eventually going to knock it down and build a bigger house on that lot. But for a time I had it rented. And I discovered that this tiny house was the best rental I had. It was never empty for more than 24 hours because people loved the fact that they could afford to live there, and it was like their own house.
Yeah, the other advantage some people pointed out, which is interesting, is that there are a lot of people that work during the night and they're home during the day. And if you live in an apartment house, it can be very noisy. And so living in an ADU gives you the privacy at night.
Sure.
Also, some people have children and they want outdoor space for the children to play. And most of the ADUs that I have in this book, they created outdoor space for the ADU, even if it's a small space, so that they have outdoor space, which for the most part, you don't have in an apartment building.
Sure.
And another aspect, which I think is really notable, is that when people put ADUs in a town and they increase the density, there's not as much of an incentive to put multiplexes. Like I live in Greenwich, and they're putting a lot of these big buildings up for rentals, and they're mostly very expensive. And it doesn't serve the purpose of supplying enough housing for middle range. I'm not even talking about affordable. I'm talking about middle range people, because they're renting for $7,000 to $10,000 for a 2-bedroom house. So the ADU is a more affordable way, and it also maintains the look of the town.
You don't have a slip-in mid-rise apartment building suddenly in the middle of the neighborhood. Yeah.
And the ADUs are mostly behind the house, so they don't change the nature of the community.
Now, many of our readers and listeners are concerned about sustainability. How do ADUs fare in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability practices?
So interestingly, a lot of the codes have changed since people built their main house, and people are putting mini splits in them, more efficient ways of heating and cooling their house. There are several of the ADUs I have no gas, and as there's been a push to get rid of gas in housing, and so a lot of them do not have gas, and they have small appliances, and so they're built very efficiently. Because it's a small space, people can put more energy into the windows. There's not as many windows, so you could maybe put triple pane where you wouldn't put it in a bigger house. And what I'm finding is a lot of people focused on quality rather than quantity. And so these houses are built very efficiently. Sometimes they put solar panels on, and sometimes they decide that the way that it's situated, they could put solar panels better on the ADU than they did on the primary house, and they could use it for the primary house as well. So
I see. Because usually they're two-story, or why? They stand up tall in the backyard? Why would solar panels work?
you need the orientation is
Oh,
important.
I see. You could, or you may not have the right orientation on your
Right.
main house, but you could certainly put the roof in any direction you want on the
Right.
ADU, and suddenly you have a place for it. I understand. Now, I spoke at the beginning about contractors that may want to evolve into becoming home builders rather than remodeling contractors. And I thought this was an excellent transition. I know I transitioned from being carpenter's helper into a
Yeah.
remodeling contractor. I started building additions, and after I built a number of additions, I suddenly started feeling the confidence to build a house. And I built my own house because I didn't have the confidence to build anybody else's. So that's how I got started in the business. And I was thinking, man, building ADUs really is a great trial run for building a home, because you are essentially building a little house. So what do you suggest for contractors looking to pivot towards building ADUs as a kind of a transition into full-blown home building? What are the skills or areas of expertise that you think are critical for success?
I think anybody that is a builder and knows the building trades can definitely build an ADU. And I think what's been interesting is that a lot of builders that maybe weren't getting enough large homes to build, and maybe there's not a lot of property in a town to build a lot more houses, they can build ADUs and they can do very well as a business. I have a guy in Atlanta who started building ADUs, and that's his primary business. And people are calling, and he's very busy. And what he did is he was able to, I guess, hire an architect, design 3 or 4 or 5 designs. So it's a product rather than having to design from scratch. And he's doing incredibly well selling his ADUs. So it becomes a really successful business, and it's faster to build because you already have the plans. He's already been approved on some of these with the towns. I think it's a great opportunity for builders. I'm seeing builders popping up in various places, particularly California, where this is becoming their main business, and people are looking for these. And so if you say, this is something I'm experienced at doing, you can really make a whole livelihood and a great business out of doing this, and maybe building multiple ones at the same time. And it doesn't involve a lot of, like you said, a lot of cranes and a lot of heavy equipment.
Now, you are excellent at marketing. I know this by seeing all your articles and book promotions everywhere. How would you recommend that a remodeling contractor that wants to get into the business of building ADUs, how would he pitch it? What are some good angles to use in pitching this as a business?
I think that builders and architects in general are not great at promoting themselves. And I've been writing books, and it's been a real challenge to even promote my books. Even some of the people that are in my books don't help promote the book or even buy the book. So I think that you have to go on social media the way I do. I'm relentless about it. I enjoy it. I like interacting with people, but you need to go on social media, on LinkedIn, on ADU, get in touch with some of the local publications. Every town has a publication, and say, I do this, and maybe put a sketch of an ADU that you get an architect to design for you, and say, I'm your person if you want to build an ADU.
I bet if a contractor that was going to build their very first ADU got in touch with a reporter at the local paper and said, look what I'm doing, I'm building an ADU, the reporter would be really turned on by the idea, because it's a trend, it's something that the reporter can dig into. And then they come out and interview the customer, the family that you're building the ADU for, you, the builder, and you'd get tremendous proportion. I bet you would launch you into the business. Just that one project could launch you into the business and that's what you call guerrilla marketing, right? Which is kind of marketing without paying for an advertisement.
You need to be proactive. I have no budget for promotion. And
Mhm.
I do it all myself. And I'm in newspapers across the United States and Canada, not sometimes the ones that I want to be in addition. But I think it's important to put yourself out there and to say, I'm available to do this. I really lucked out. In 2 weeks, I'm speaking at the Greenwich Library, and I got the first selectman who's very pro ADUs to come and speak with me, which was really a coup. And
Sure.
interesting, they only have so many seats. It's sold out. They had
Wow.
80 seats in the library, and it's not for 2 weeks. It's not until
But
April
that
2nd.
shows interest. That shows interest. Forgive me, not so much in Sheri, but in ADUs. There is a great interest. And for those that don't know it, there is a movement afoot throughout all of the nation. Places that didn't used to allow these are now writing them into their legislations. States are beginning to allow them into their legislations because it's
Right.
seen as a means to help mitigate or reduce the affordability crisis. No?
Yeah, it's very true. Whenever I tell people this, they say, "Oh, I want one of those."
Yeah.
You know?
We all want one, no? You've written several books, a lot of them about prefabricated housing. You've written a whole series of books. So what inspired you to write this one in particular? What do you hope that people in the construction, remodeling, and architectural industries take away from this book? This
So
beautiful book.
thank you. This is actually my 12th book, which is shocking. I thought after the first book I was done. And as I've written, I've evolved into the importance of energy efficiency and sustainability. And so I went from books like Prefabulous and Sustainable to Almost Off the Grid. And those kinds of things have been very important. And I, as somebody who is downsizing myself, downsizing has become a very important aspect. And I've discovered that living small is very comfortable, and you can be just as happy in a small house as a big house. And so I guess about 4 books back, I found a laneway house in Vancouver, and I profiled it, and I got very good response to it. And every book that I've done since has had 1 or 2 ADUs or laneway houses. And I thought people were always interested in this. And when I would go and speak at a conference and I wanted to speak about prefab, all anybody wanted to talk about was ADUs. How do I do this? How can I go about this? And so I thought, you know what? The time is really prime to do an entire book on ADUs. But it was a challenge because there's a lot of ADUs out there, but finding the ones that are incredibly sustainable, incredibly energy efficient, and really beautiful and varied, having some on top of garages, having some independent, and having a good story. I think this book is incredibly inspiring to anybody that is thinking about building an ADU or dreaming about ADU sometime, and even people that never thought about it. As I said, I have a friend that lives in Old Greenwich, and she doesn't have a big piece of property, but she has a garage. And she's thinking, wow, I can make extra income on this ADU. So I think everybody is really interested in this. And so I think it was just a very hot topic.
Good retirement investment. If you're approaching retirement, instead of investing another however much into your 401k, maybe build an ADU because it'll give you income.
I had a very interesting experience. There was a house that was very traditional in California, and they had a breezeway. And they decided they wanted to retire. They could use the income. They closed off the breezeway, and they made the most adorable ADU with an entrance in the back of the house. And the people that pass the house say it looks like it was there forever. It doesn't look like an addition. And they're making good money. There's a lot of universities, there's a lot of professors and students who need housing. And this is a great way for people to make extra money for their retirement and also to provide housing for other people. And also, like actually out west in some of the ski areas, there are a lot of people that work in some of the stores and restaurants, and they have to travel very far to service those areas. And if you build an ADU, you can rent that out to those people.
I've worked in Vail area for several years and built homes, and most of them included an ADU because of the need in the area for workforce housing. It's an expensive area to live, and that extra income really helped with qualifying for the mortgage for our buyers who were actually pretty well heeled, but they still needed a little bump.
And a lot of people really like living in an ADU. I have a couple, and I think they're also in California. These two guys, they had a big house. It was very traditional, and they really wanted something very modern, and they have a big art collection. So they built an ADU on their property, which is really an interesting unit, and they gave the house, the primary house, to one of their daughters. And so sometimes people want something different. Not in this book, but in a previous book, I had people build an ADU to rent out, and they liked it so much that they ended up living in the ADU and renting out the house.
Now, Sheri, we always end the Pro Trade Craft Career Toolbox with a little homework, since this is career preparation. And I would suggest for homework the following. First of all, look up ADU online. Just put ADU. What is it? And you'll get a host of articles, photographs, explanations. Go to your building and safety, go to your city hall, and find out what is the legislation or what's required. Can I build ADUs in my area? Find out. You'll get a lot of information. You may discover that they have pre-approved plans. There may be some examples. You might find some examples to look at in your own neighborhood. And I would really highly recommend, and I don't usually do this because we're not here to sell anything, but I would really recommend getting Sheri's ADUs, The Perfect Housing Solution. It's such a nice book that you will get inspiration, but moreover, you can show up at a client's house with this book, have the client start thumbing through it, and their imagination will go wild. And I'm pretty sure that you will walk out of there with a contract. So that's a good textbook right there to bring to your clients and show them what it can be. Because I think once you get into it, you may be inspired to build one on your own place. So thank you, Sheri, so much for joining us today. Really enjoy your participation in our program. I think it's a really fun and brand new horizon for so many. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. Thank you for your beautiful book, and wish you the best of luck with selling 1 million.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Nice to see you again, Fernando.
Bye-bye.
Bye.